downtown, and we are in Crazy Woman Cellars with Bennett, so welcome.
Thank you, it's good to be here.
This was one of the first tasting rooms that when we were checking out the downtown that we had walked in, and I fell in love with the whole vibe of it. So, you know, people need to get in here and see it, and we're going to talk about that vibe in a bit, but before we do that, I just want to hear your origin story. How did you fall in love with wine?
Yeah, it took a long time to get there. I think longer for me than most. You know, I started out like most of my buddies, a lot of beer, a lot of tequila back in the day. If we were going to drink, that's what we did. We kind of looked at it as wine was for the ladies kind of thing, and if you were a guy, you drank beer or tequila. Obviously pretty closed-minded at the time. But at some point in my 30s, I made my way to Napa with a group of friends, and up until then, I just thought red wine was red wine, white wine was white wine, never even understood varietals or anything about it, didn't really care. And then I got to Napa and started doing some comparative tasting, and that was when it started to click for me how different each glass of red wine was from the one to the left of it or the one to the right of it, and how you could really pick up the difference. And as soon as you start doing that, you start to develop a palate immediately. What did I like? What didn't I like? What was my favorite? Well, why is it my favorite? Why is it different? And it was a correlation for me that was very similar to cigars. I love a nice cigar every now and then. And like wine, cigars, to get a cigar in your hand is a long journey. It's a very romantic kind of thing that exists in wine and cigars, where someone farms it for a tremendous amount of time. They put a lot of passion into a lot of effort. And then there's someone else that has to cut it and dry it and roll it. And there's different personalities with cigars, dark wrappers and light wrappers. And there's just a lot of correlation between that and wine. And so when I started trying wine, it connected with me that this also, to wind up in my hand, someone had to plant a vineyard, and someone had to turn the soil, and they had to maintain it. Someone else had to come along, and they had to make the wine, and just all this effort that gets a glass of wine into your hand. And if you stop and think about it, you know, each glass of wine is rather majestic. Whether it's your favorite wine or not, there's a lot of effort. Someone's heart and soul went into it. So I connected on it almost on an emotional level, and then the more I started trying it, the more I started to develop what I liked and what I didn't like, and eventually made my way to Paso. I lived in LA. Paso was only a 3-hour drive away, and so in addition to the wine, I just fell in love with Paso's culture. It is 30,000 people, but a small town. You go to the dry cleaners, you know somebody. You go to the grocery store, you know somebody, whether that's good or bad. Depends on the person. But very small town, and everybody was so incredibly warm. And so Paso for me was like a living and breathing Thomas Kincaid painting. You know, it was just this soft, beautiful place where my blood pressure dropped. And so I wanted to be in Paso, and I wanted to be involved in wine. And the more I was here, it just kind of took on a life of its own and almost kind of took over my life and what I thought about from day to day.
So I'm going to say you are the very first person who has correlated wine to cigars, and I have never thought about that. But it's brilliant.
You're going to be a cigar lover before we're done today.
Maybe, you know what? My brother smokes cigars, and whenever I'm with him, I'll do one puff or whatever, just to, you know, to taste it. And that's all I'm doing is, you know, he'll go, "Oh, you'll like this one," and you know, but the taste really is the flavors, the aromatics, and all of that stuff. I think maybe you should do. I don't even know if this could be a
cigar pairing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've thought about it, except I've got an indoor tasting room when most of my customers are women, so I don't know how big of a sale it would be, but I do think about it.
Do cigars.
I've been surprised from time to time. You just don't know. At home, I think about it. You know, sometimes I'll light up a cigar and I'll think, what do I want to drink with this? And you always wind up going, of course, with a bold, leathery red of one kind or another, and it's amazing. And I know it sounds crazy, but even to someone who doesn't smoke cigars, if I asked you, what would you pair with a cigar, a rosé, or a big, heavy Petite Syrah, you'd say, well, of course, a Petite Syrah. Like, there's an obvious connection there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I think I'm putting you on that mission.
There you go. Yeah. mission accepted.
Yes. And so you found your way to Paso, and did you start making wine right away? Did you?
So what happened is I semi-retired. I bought property on purpose with land to plant. So it was definitely in my mind, but I was also well aware that it's a great way to lose all your money if you're not careful. And so at first what I thought, I'd spent 28 years selling insurance. That was my living. That's how I got my kids through college. That's how I paid my mortgage off. It's how I was going to retire. And I ran my own business, and I was very proud of the business we ran, but insurance is not the most exciting thing in the world. So I did it because I had to. It was my job. So, they say often that a second job, their second career is what defines a person. You know way more about them based on what their second career is, because we often choose that based on our passions after doing our first career to meet our obligations. And so I thought just wanted to farm grapes. I was in love with the idea of it. I was in love with the idea of not being in an office, not looking at spreadsheets, driving a tractor, getting my hands dirty. That was really what I wanted to do. So I went to school to Hancock College, which is a program I cannot speak highly enough about. Cal Poly, God bless them, great program, but they wanted me to matriculate. They said, look, you have to take your general ed, you have to take English and health. And I was in my late 40s and retired, and I thought, well, that's 2 years I'm going to give up for something I'm not interested in. So they recommended Hancock College. It's in Santa Maria, California. They have a great viticulture program, great enology program. They have a fully functional commercial winery on campus that you work in. They have a vineyard on campus with about 20 varietals. And so you just don't sit there and watch a PowerPoint presentation on chemistry. You watch that, and then you leave and you go, and I worked for 2 years. And it's a great program for them, because not only is it free labor, but it's labor that's paying them to be there.
Right.
But you learn all the mistakes. We made some Herculean mistakes. I remember us hooking up the wrong hose in the bottling truck, and we bottled 50 cases of Chardonnay and Cabernet bottles. You learn very quickly how awful it can be if you're not paying attention. But anyway, I took the viticulture program first, and I thought I was just going to farm grapes and sell them to winemakers. I had no inkling of making wine. But I thought when I was in school, well, if I'm going to sell wine grapes to winemakers, I should understand how winemakers think. So I'll take that program. And I was maybe a half an hour into the first day, and I'm like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Challenge being I'd already planted an acre of grapes with 1,000 plants. So I thought, well, it looks like I'm going to do both. And so I farm my own vineyard. I say this all the time in the tasting room. That is incredibly hard work. It is not like the Keanu Reeves movie, or you're not riding around on a white stallion, smoking a cigar, looking at your holdings. It is hands and knees, killing gophers, spraying, turning dirt over in soil that is hard as cement in the summer. It's brutal work. And so I leaned quickly into the winemaking. I'm much rather have my nose in a barrel than my hands in the soil under those conditions. But I farmed it dutifully for 5 years, and then I handed off that aspect of it to someone to farm it for me and focus strictly on winemaking. I finished the program at Hancock and started interning and making wine at home. And that's what you do. You immerse yourself and you say, let's make some mistakes. Let's see how this goes. And it was a great luxury for a couple of years to make wine at home, because there was no one to answer to, and I could make mistakes and I could experiment. And I have some of those mistakes in bottle in the basement of this tasting room, and I hope no one ever finds them. I tried aging whiskey Cabernet in whiskey barrels for 24 months. They saw nothing but a whiskey barrel, and guess what? It tastes like whiskey. It looks like cab. And I gave it to a friend to try, who was a wine connoisseur, and he said it tastes like church wine and battery acid.
Oh,
but what a great luxury!
Truth.
Yes, no, and I appreciate it. What a great luxury to say, let's just screw around. So. I interned at a winery called MCV, where I still crush, and Matt Villard there was very patient with me, and I learned a lot from him. And the thing about Paso is all the winemakers are so collaborative, and so that you can ask questions and they'll answer. And I just had a lot of friends help me out and give me feedback. I have a mentor named Marcy Millette, who's the smartest person in Paso Robles, period. She's a chemist, winemaker at Gallo for many years, and if any winemaker in Paso runs into trouble, I don't care who it is, how experienced they are, her phone rings. And so when you surround yourself with people like that, it's kind of hard to go wrong. So long-winded answer, but the journey to get to opening a tasting room, I respected that was, I needed to put in 7 or 8 years of work and learning from people before I dared open a tasting room. And I put the time in and loved every second of it. And I still lean on some of those people sometimes. And during COVID, thought, you know what? Life's short. Why don't you open a tasting room and have some fun and see what happens? And so we truly do this for fun. That's
fantastic. So you planted those vines. What was your first actual vintage commercially? Not
20 was the first vintage for the Cabernet. We planted Cabernet first, 500 plants, and then planted Syrah about a year later. The Cab is part of our 20 Cab is multiple vineyards. It's Onyx, It's a West Side vineyard, and it's my vineyard that was in Templeton. That's in Templeton. Our Syrah appears in our 21 Syrah, which we just bottled and will release probably sometime later this year. Tasting amazing, but it's our own Syrah plus Onyx's Kyler Canyon property in Willow Creek, and very excited about that as well. So the Cabernet Syrah have surfaced in 20 and 21 as part of those bottles, and the rest we source from the best grapes we can get in Paso. Honestly, I mean that's the winemaking style. If the question comes up to that at some point, it's buy the best grapes we can get, buy the best barrels we can get, and try to stay the hell out of the way. And it served us well in that the outcome with the wine has been what I hoped for, particularly on the reds.
Yeah, I think, there's that saying, you can't make great wine from shitty grapes or, bad grapes or whatever.
Oh my God, is this a PG-13 podcast? I can say
you can say whatever you
everything
want.
Just changed, yeah.
You can say whatever you want. There's a little explicit language in this episode.
You got
That's all
it,
I gotta
okay,
say.
well there we go, yeah.
That's all I have to say.
We'll use the foul language when we talk about the economics of owning a winery.
Oh, very good. Right. But you definitely can overwork wine. So you can have great grapes and the winemaker can screw that up.
Yeah, everybody has their own winemaking style, and I say all the time there's no bad wine. I mean, unless there's an overt flaw like VA or something, but everybody's winemaking style is different. And there are great winemakers in Paso whose wine I can't stand, and there's winemakers no one talks about that I think their wine is amazing. And but I do feel personally that you should taste a difference from vintage to vintage. And there are great wineries, great winemakers, and it's just different philosophies. But their philosophy is they've got a huge wine club to cater to, and so every year they have to meet that wine club's expectation by making sure it tastes a little bit like the prior year. They're afraid that if a vintage is vastly different, that people will say, well, look, I love your 19, but I'm not so fond of your 20, so I'm going to exit the wine club. And that's everybody's decision to make, and that's fine. I love wondering every year what the outcome is going to be. And outside of getting a real problem vintage, and that does happen. Last year, our Petite Syrah had a lot of mold in it. We had to do a lot of sorting because it rained the day before it picked, and it was 100 degrees. And Petite Syrah, the bunches look like smashed faces. There's no room for the wind and everything to go through there. So outside of just having a problem, which we all do, we all have that year when the grapes come in, you go, oh dear.
Yeah.
Most years though, for us, we work with great farmers. We work with Onyx. We work with Glenrose. We work with Kalisa. The grapes come in, they're generally in immaculate condition. And then my job is to just be a shepherd or a Sherpa, really a Sherpa, and just kind of say, okay, we're going this way and just get it through fermentation. We do use cultured yeast because we tend to use big, bold reds. We pick at about 26 bricks. I'm a big believer in getting through fermentation. And cultured yeast is a nice way to ensure that you get through it. For those that use native yeast, I respect that. It's a risk. And I just don't like any residual sugar in my wine at all. So not to get too far off topic, but so we use basically the best grapes, the best barrels, get it through completely through fermentation, and then just let it do what it's going to do. And if you use great grapes and you manage it and you keep it topped and everything, you don't have to use a lot of sulfur. You just don't have to do a lot. And so guess what? Our 19 Syrah is so different from our 20 Syrah, you wouldn't recognize them as the same varietal. But I'm happy with that. And there are people that love the 19, there are people who love the 20. And you're here in Paso the last 3 years. Look at our summer this year.
Yeah.
When are we going to pick? Are we going to pick in November? I don't know. It's been such a cool summer.
Yeah.
Last summer it was 113 for like 9 straight days. I picked my Syrah one day after I picked my Viognier. They should harvest 6 weeks apart. But that's what I love about it. I love the approach of let's see what the grapes are going to do for us this year and let them do the talking, and then you see what the vintage is, and it creates great dialogue in the tasting room as well.
When you did your first commercial vintage, were you said you had the experience of school.
Yeah.
Where, okay, I'm messing, I messed up, but hey, it's school, right? And some internships where, okay, I messed up, but now this is my gig.
Yeah.
Did something switch in your brain, like more panic mode, more stress mode,
I call
not sleeping?
Since we're PG-13, I call it a laundry marking moment. Where you don't sneeze. It's terrifying. I'm just getting to the point now where I can taste my wine for what it is. The first 2 vintages, I could not taste it and like it. I was my own biggest critic, and I'm told that that's what every winemaker goes through, that for the first 2 years, like, this is awful, this is awful, this is not gonna sell. I was pouring my wine for the first year in the tasting room, and I was emotionally flinching. You know, like, they're gonna hate this, they're gonna hate this. And people are joining the wine club, and they're saying it's wonderful, and it took me a long time. Actually, I have to give credit, Callie, who's been with me from day one, my girlfriend, and also the vision for the entire tasting room, our social media, everything but how the wine tastes.
Yay, Callie!
Has been a great sounding board for me, because she was tasting it and going, this tastes great, you're going to be fine, you know. And I felt like I was getting like an emotional back rub for the first 2 years of, everybody likes you, you're going to be okay. You know, it's like part therapy, part, you know, to build the confidence, because you just think, it's just terrifying. When I was selling insurance, I had no control over the product. And so if they didn't like it, I said, well, some attorney drafted it, I'm sorry you don't like it, but that's what it is, and I can't do anything about it. It's very different pouring something that you put your heart and soul into for 2 years than having someone say, it's not for me. And it's kind of a gut punch. And then you get enough experience where you make the correlation that, look, even my favorite restaurant, there's like 2 or 3 things I like on the menu, and I don't like the rest of the stuff. And you start working in a tasting flight, and you start building confidence. Well, yeah, they didn't like my Grenache, but wait till they try the Syrah. And I've even said to customers when they say, well, I'm not real fond of your Grenache, I look at them and I go, you know what, I'm going to get you. I don't know what it's going to be in the flight, but I'm going to get you. And you're going to look up and say, wow, I love this. So let's roll here and let's see what it is. And I always get them with something. And it just took experience in the tasting room to get comfortable with it. And now when I try my wine, I feel like I can try it as a customer.
And you know, that's fantastic. And I know the feeling, like when they take that glass up to their, especially like each new vintage, right?
Yes, yeah.
You know, I mean, you're saying 2 years. We've been making wine 10 years, and I'm still, that new vintage comes out, and I'm like, when that first person tastes it, you're like, oh, cringing, like, and they say, oh my God, this is so good. You're like, all good.
But that circles back to what we were talking about earlier, which is if you're worried about each new vintage, it's because you're letting the vintage be what it's supposed to be. If you made it taste exactly like the last vintage, you wouldn't have to wonder. You'd go, I know what this is. Your customer would say, I know what this is. Well, now what do you talk about? You know, part of the adventure with this also is we're still learning how long each year is different with bottle shock. So we'll bottle something in April, and we'll say, okay, we'll give it 8 weeks, and because we're boutique, we have to pour very quickly. I don't have years of inventory. We're new and we're small, so I'm like bottling and pouring. Well, each vintage is different. We've got some that just came out of bottle shock. It took them, I don't know, 3 or 4 months to come out of bottle shock. I'm like, why is that? Well, this year's different than last year, and you just have to accept those terms. And even my 20 Grenache, we're almost out of it. We're down to a couple of cases, and now it's tasting better than ever. I wish I could have held it for a while, you know? So we're trying to build up a little inventory every year so that we can let these things age out a little bit and pour. But I love the excitement of each vintage and wondering, and that's part of the thrill of this whole thing, is the wondering. If we knew what the outcome was going to be.
Boring.
Yeah, exactly. Now, sometimes it's a little too exciting.
That
Once you're there, but it is exciting.
So we are actually in the tasting room. So if anybody is going to watch it on the YouTube channel, you can see this incredible mural. But so before we get into the incredible art, because there's meaning behind this art, the name Crazy Woman Cellars. So controversial name, awesome. Personally, I think it's a kick-ass name. But so tell us the true story behind the name.
Yeah. So, 350 wineries in Paso, I'm guessing. When I was working on the business plan for this about 5 years ago, I think there were about 250. And of course, the name and the brand are a big deal in wine. You'd like to think that your success is based solely on the taste, but no one's going to come taste unless they connect somehow with you. And so everybody thinks it's an ex-wife joke. That's the joke. Every person that comes and goes, it must be an ex-wife joke. And I always try and give credit where credit's due, which is it was my ex-wife's idea. She had been raised in Mendocino, California, which is kind of the last hippie colony in California. And she was one of 4 sisters living with a single mom on a 160-acre homestead in the 1970s. It was a sheep barn with 4 little girls. No plumbing, no electricity, no doors, no windows, no phone. and a good 20-minute walk on a dirt road to get to it. So it was very 1870s, but it took place in the 1970s. And they were surrounded by a ton of pot growers who would try and come on the property and plant pot. And they would just figure, single mom, little girls, who's going to stop us? Well, my mother-in-law, her name was Wanda. She passed about 10 years ago, but she carried a 6-shooter. And if you came on the property, you got shot at. She was protecting her little girls. She was protecting what little belongings she had. And it was the only way to protect herself. No sheriff was going to come out. She had no way to call him. And so she developed a reputation very quickly in a little town called Ukiah, and in this area where the ranch was, where no one messed with her. Even the pot growers were like, look, she's crazy, she's unpredictable, no one likes unpredictable, work around her. But what they really meant was she was fierce, and they were intimidated. Pot growers were intimidated by this lady. And as you can imagine, she lived her whole life that way. I used to say all the time, it's not that she broke rules, she didn't know they existed. She kind of had this mindset of, I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do and everybody's gonna get the hell out of my way. And so we were constantly wringing our fingers, worried for her. What's she gonna do next? What kind of trouble is she gonna get in? When is this gonna come back and bite her? And it just never did. She just was a fierce woman. She carried a small bag around with her with some belongings in it with a machete in it. That's how Wanda rolled. So we referred to her as the crazy woman all the time. It was a term we used around the house, meaning fierce. And so my wife said, look, we use the term all the time. Let's call it Crazy Woman Cellars. Women are the ones who taste wine. Women will connect with it. And all I kept thinking from a man's perspective was, you do not call women crazy, and this is going to backfire. It's catchy, but they're going to burn the building down. And so we spent about 6 months debating it. And finally, I just said, look, no one knows your mom, but there's a million stories like her. Why don't we make it about all women where, they made a dent in the universe, but half their battle was the fact that they were being called crazy. In other words, no one would listen because they were a woman. That story, there's a million of them. And then we can tell those stories. And, in the end, she was right. 99% of the people that come in are women, and they love the name. They get it immediately. They say, you're damn right, I'm crazy, watch yourself. And they sit down, and they connect immediately with it. And so the tasting room, the website, the Instagram, all the social media, everything is that same message over and over and over again. Callie does all that work. She found the artist. If you come to the tasting room, you're going to find hand-painted art of some of the most incredible women in history. Of course, we've made a very small dent because we don't have a big tasting room, but you're going to see the Rosa Parks, you're going to see the Harriet Tubmans, and it's apolitical. So we've got Ayn Rand on the wall. I have a tremendous amount of respect for her. You don't have to believe her message, but you have to respect her fight. You could see her on 60 Minutes in like 1960 in black and white TV, Mike Wallace smoking a cigarette, grilling her, and she mops the floor with him. You did not do that in 1960. A woman did not go on 60 Minutes, argue macroeconomics, and beat the hell out of Mike Wallace. She embarrasses him. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for Mike Wallace, but she just intellectually was superior. But she clenched her fist and had the fight. Gloria Steinem. She and Ayn Rand agreed on nothing. I've got their paintings facing each other. It's my inside joke. They would have clawed each other's eyes out. They agreed on nothing but a woman's right to her body. Outside of that, they agreed on nothing, but you have to agree with both of them in that they believed what they were doing. They tremendous sacrifice, probably very hard lives in the public eye. In Ayn Rand's case, from the 40s until honestly the 90s. In Gloria Steinem's case, the late 60s all the way through the 90s. These were not easy battles, and they stood up and let bullets bounce off their chest. And so that's the point of the room. None of these women agreed with each other. I'm not asking you to agree with them. I don't agree with all of them. You can't, because they don't agree with each other. But you have to respect the fight. The mural we just had painted by a wonderful artist named Tim Abraham, a wonderful man, Frida Kahlo, Maya Angelou, Malala, Amelia Earhart, and behind me, Judge Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female Supreme Court Justice. We wanted something hip, we wanted something cool, but we wanted to be respectful. We wanted it to be about the women who fought the fight. We're very happy with it, and it fits perfectly with our tasting room, which is great history, but also a laid-back, fun vibe. A lot of velvet furniture. Every area is set up almost like your living room. Unlike commercial wineries, we don't bring you in and say you get an hour because you've got your next appointment, please leave. We say bring your laptop, sit down. We're the Starbucks of tasting rooms. You want to sit down and hang out for a couple of hours? We love that. Have a glass of wine. you want to talk to us about all the paintings, you want to talk to us, we say all the time, anything but politics and poetry.
There you go.
We're happy to talk to you about it. So that's the vibe. It's a 100-year-old building, original hardwood floors. I wish they could tell stories.
Yeah.
A lot of just big area rugs, velvet furniture, beautiful art, and a lot of great conversation. And it's worked out great. The names work great. The vibe works great. All the social media that Callie does. We every month on our website we have a crazy woman of the month. It's usually a woman you've never heard of, and you read it and you think, how is this not a movie? Our first one, and still my favorite, was the first documented female fighter pilot, Marina Ruskova. She fought for the Russians in World War II. They were our allies. She was the first female fighter pilot. They were running out of pilots. They gave her a plywood plane, no cockpit, no parachute, no guns.
Of course they did.
She flew over Russia. Imagine flying with no cockpit in Russia. She was the first. She was a proof of concept. After her, there were 1,000 female fighter pilots. They were called the Night Witches. They flew 23,000 missions, dropped 30,000 tons of bombs on Hitler. Ever heard of her? She died in action.
Wow.
No one's heard of her. How is that not a movie? That story has to be told.
Yeah.
And by the way, our 21 reserve Grenache is called Night Witch.
Oh.
Yeah, so we do that every month. Every week we do a Woman of the Week on Instagram. That's usually more topical. So when Betty White died, we focused on her work with PETA. If they're on the wall here, they didn't just make a lot of money. They actually contributed to the universe.
Yeah, they are awesome, and they are fantastic conversational pieces. And you know, I think that the name Crazy Woman, first of all, being right next door, people come. I can see how many people come and take pictures of the window.
Yeah.
You know, they're standing there doing the selfies in front of it.
Sure.
So they definitely get it. But yeah, I can understand how you were a little nervous about starting with that.
It didn't backfire though. We've had one young lady came in and ignored. She saw a crazy woman on the window and ignored everything walking up to the bar. There's 40 or 50 paintings of amazing women. And our tagline is celebrating the countless women who changed history. It's on our window. Rather, she missed all of it. Came in, balled me out pretty good. But younger Chris would have thrown her out, but I've got a bunch of gray hairs now and some life experience. I thought it would be a great opportunity to have a conversation. And at the end of it, to her credit, she stopped. She looked at all the art and really came back. She didn't apologize. It would have been great if she did, but she bought some wine and she left. But that's the only person other than a gentleman who decided to yell at me about Ayn Rand. He sat down at the bar and he was very upset about the fact that Ayn Rand was on the wall. And again, since it's PG-13, I'll tell you what I said, which was Ayn Rand's on the wall because she doesn't give a shit what you or anybody else thinks. The whole point is they did this. They couldn't have done it if they worried about people's opinions. She doesn't give a shit about what you think, and neither do I. And he hasn't been back, which is odd.
How weird. How weird.
I won't say his name, but I know his name.
So you go back to the small town.
That's exactly right, yes. Show more respect than he did.
So if you had to pick a specialty for Crazy Woman Cellars, do you have one, or?
As far as the wine we make?
Yes.
You know, it's funny, people ask, we're a Rhone house. We make all Rhones. The exception is we do make a Cab Sauv, because in Paso, Cab Sauv's kind of a religion. It's got a rich history here along with Zinfandel. But we make a Cab Sauv. Everything else is Rhones, and people say, why Rhones? When you start new, you need to get grape contracts. And in Paso, we grow a lot of Rhones, and so you're more likely to be able to get a grape contract on Rhones, right? If I decided to make some unusual grape, there might have been one farmer that made it or two farmers, and so I would have just been reducing my odds. So I started with Rhones, but I also started with Rhones because that's what I enjoy drinking. And if you're going to stick your nose in a barrel for 2 years, you probably ought to pick wines that you enjoy drinking. And so I love Rhones. We make a Grenache, a Syrah, a Petit Syrah. We make a GSM. On whites, we have a Viognier, and we have a Grenache Blanc, and then all of our rosés generally are saugnéed off one of those. And so there'll be a Syrah base or a Grenache base and so forth. But I will tell you that the grape I'm passionate about is Syrah. And the reason I love Syrah, I say this all the time, it's kind of the chicken of grapes. People say I like Syrah, and I say, well, that's like saying I like chicken. What do you mean? You can love chicken, but is that fried chicken? Is it barbecue chicken? Is it chicken cacciatore? Is it chicken soup? You know, there's a million things you can do and alter it. And Syrah it's really kind of the schizophrenic of grapes. It can be anything. Almost every version of it I like. People make Syrahs that are kind of leathery. They make them that are just 17% alcohol. They make them their fruit bombs. You can really do a lot with it just depending on what you like. And so I like that because I like not knowing exactly what it's going to be. Where cab, God bless it, we make a cab. Everybody makes a cab. But if you open a cab for me, I just know it's going to have a nose of cherry or cherry cola. I know what the finish is going to be. Even cab blends, I know almost just off the nose, whether it's cab heavy or something else heavy. Syrah is just so tricky and so interesting, and it's like your best friend. If you have a really good best friend, it takes years to know them. They're complex. That's why they're your friend. If you knew everything in 10 seconds, what's interesting about that? The most interesting people are the people that are open about their flaws and open about the mistakes they've made. And Syrah to me is just like this child that doesn't know what it wants to be yet. And so, I don't know, it's just the grape I've fallen in love with. And so I spoke earlier about how we let each vintage talk about what the terroir was that year. We let the grape do that. Our 19 Syrah turned out to be, ironically, in a year where we had no fires, it wound up very smoky. People say, oh, smoke taint. We had no fires in 19. Yeah. It's not smoke taint. It's
See,
just...
that bothers me. I'm going to interrupt. That
no,
bothers me
please.
because there are two very different smokes, right? There is Syrah smoke, and then there is smoke taint, which is not smoke, it's ashtray.
That's right.
It's a very different thing, but
that's
the
right.
Consumer puts
the word smoke taint made its way into the ether, you know, in 20, and now, and you've got all these people saying if you have a 20, it's smoke taint. It's like, no, it is not. Yeah. Not in Paso Robles. There's a couple of people that were hitting North Paso with smoke taint. Most people were not. And yes, no, I know you personally suffered from that, and that's rough. And I have friends also that were in the San Miguel area and so forth. But a good Syrah or Petite Syrah often has a smoky finish, unrelated to smoke taint. So our 19 tends to be a little bit of smoke in the finish, a little bit of bacon. Syrah often has a eucalyptus finish. It can be so many different things. It's what I love about it. Our 20 Syrah, we say it all the time, it's just raspberries in the front and lava cake in the back. You cannot tell from the 19 to the 20 that it's not only the same vineyard, but the same plants. And I swear to you, the same barrel protocol. Everything was done the same. I sourced the barrels from the same places, did everything the same way, but they were very different years. 20, ironically, was a year where we had a ton of smoke taint. This vineyard was not affected by that with one exception. We had cloud cover because of the smoke over the vineyards in Paso for about 4 or 5 weeks that summer. And so the grapes hung on the vines for like 4 weeks longer. They didn't get direct sunlight. So no smoke taint at all. You have to be near heat actually to get smoke taint. We were nowhere near it, but it just made for a lovely Syrah, very different because we picked in like November. And then you get to 21 where we pick Syrah like the first week of September, you know, and so each year is so different, but I'm so happy with each of them. And it makes it fun in the taste room. Sometimes we do Syrah flights. We do our 19, 20, and 21, and you think, what the hell? How is this made the exact same way from the same plants? Like they were just 3 vastly different years, and I have a hunch 2023 now is going to be very different, you know. So I just love that grape. It's Syrah, I consider our flagship. Now, when I say that, it doesn't sell any faster than anything else. All of our wine actually sells at about the same rate because people's palates are so different. So someone who tries our Viognier will love that, and I'll try our Grenache Blanc and say, that's not for me. And I say, I get it. One's very tropical, one's a lot of green apple, and so forth. But to me, the wine I'm most proud of, and the wine I have to resist taking home and drinking, Callie's always saying to me, you can't keep taking home the 20. You know, we gotta leave some for the customers. And we're down to about 3 cases. I've pulled aside a case or 2 for myself. That's the wine I want to take home. And if someone comes in and says, I love reds and I can only try one thing, I'm going to pour them the Syrah. Not because there's any more likelihood they'll like it, but that to me is my baby. That's the one that if I'm going to have a dream about my wine at night, it's the Syrah. And it's just because it's such an ambidextrous grape.
And so you have a bottle here. Is it Syrah?
Yes. This is our 20 Syrah. Our label, unlike a lot of wineries, is going to be the same. The image on the label is the same. We're really kind of branding the winery as opposed to branding the varietal. But this is our 20 Syrah. This is the one I was just talking about. I'm going to use a word, and Callie's here in the background. If you hear her shriek, it's because she vehemently objects to the word, but I love the word swampy. for wine. She's over there right now rolling her eyes. Stop saying that. But because it's probably not a good marketing word. But I love a Syrah that, or even a red wine in general, that when you pour it, almost feels like it's pouring like motor oil. There's kind of a glug. It's just a thick, rich, and swampy is a term they use for blues music. When the beat is just a little bit behind where it should be, it just kind of drags and it's just kind of swampy. When I'm drinking this, I think of blues music, and I think of a smoke-filled room and people talking, and just that's where my head goes emotionally, which is probably why I connect so much with wine, because it's very much emotional connection for me. And that's what I think about with this wine, and it reminds me when I started making wine, as corny as this sounds, you know, no one was ever happy buying an insurance policy from me. They had to do it financially responsible. No one left and said that was great. But I wanted to make something where I could think about the fact that I made something and it's sitting between two people, two friends talking that haven't seen each other in years, or maybe someone's getting engaged. They've got a glass of my wine. That notion that you're indirectly enriching an experience somewhere, that emotional tied to it, and I feel that way even if I'm drinking this by myself. And yes, I drink by myself, so I'm in wonderful company with myself when I've been drinking. And that's what I think about with Syrah. I just think like this is just a smoke-filled room with some blues music playing. It's just that little bit behind the beat, kind of slow, thick, rich, swampy red wine.
So for the people who are viewing this, they can see that beautiful label.
Yep.
So the woman on the label, tell us about.
I get this question all the time. It's no one in particular. I've had people ask about different actresses, and it was inspired by that. What I did was I hired a firm. I told them everything I've just told you about who we are, and I feel like I've been pretty articulate in really talking about what our message is. And for 6 months, they just kept coming back with witches, demons, and vampires. They just kept coming back with scary, crazy, and it was the most frustrating experience in the world. I could not get them to understand what we were going for. They finally came back with this label, but they had blood coming out of her mouth all the way down the front of her outfit. So I said, take the blood away, and now let me look. And I love it. I do think it's a visual image of what we are, which is it's an image of a woman who's got something on her mind. She's thinking about something. She's got something to say, and also that she's not going to be quieted. Right. That she's going to say what she has to say. But it's also visually striking. There's a lot of color. And I just think the second you look at it, you think, she's interesting. Wonder what she has to say.
Without blood coming down.
Yes, without scaring anybody. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad crazy. It's there's something on her mind, and she's going to speak her mind. And I think it speaks to it. I've had lots of people ask, well, Chris, why don't you have, Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the label, or why don't you have, and it's called trademark law. So you have to be careful.
But then to me, you're representing her, and that's not what your story is. Your story is all of
that's
women.
That's such a great point. I'm glad you brought it up. I'm not trying to push any singular person's message. I'm trying to push the fact that every one of them had to fight to get that message out, and their collective message, which is, if you're going to do it, you're going to have to ball up your fist. You're going to have to take a swing. Right. And it's a great point. As soon as you isolate one of them, you're now saying, well, this is about this one person. It's not. It's about all of them as a collective. Right. Absolutely. It's a great point.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm going to use that all the time and not credit you.
There you go. No problem. No problem. But so I have to extend some major congratulations to you, because you just got the People's Choice Award and the Spirit Award at the
Winemaker Cook-Off.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a great local event, Paso Robles. I love this kind of small town stuff. This event was sponsored, and all the proceeds go to the Rotary Club. I think we raised about $90,000.
Wow.
Every winery donated their wine. And what you did was you paired up with a chef. My good friend Chad Walker, Good Eats Catering, prepared a wonderful ahi tuna tostada. We paired it with our rosé, and there was really two ways you could win. They had judges sitting there who were chefs and sommeliers and so forth, and those 7 judges decided who the winner was going to be for the pairing. But also they had the regular Paso Robles folks judge. And I would have loved to have done better with the actual judges. I think we had a dynamite product. Chad's ahi tuna tostado was amazing. And so we didn't place in the top 3 there of about 32 wineries, but for the people, the 900 people that came and paid to get in, we placed second with that group. And that's pretty exciting to know that, you know, that those are the folks I'm catering to. Yeah, we're catering to, you know, the ordinary people that come in every day and do the, you know, to quote It's a Wonderful Life, they do the living and dying in the community, they do the working. That's kind of who our customer is. Now, we love to have, we'll pour for the snobs, we don't care. we don't mind, but you know, our typical customer is the Paso Robles wine lover, and we did very well with those folks. And I was honored to, Chad invited me to partner with him and pair with him, and it was a great night, a great event. I think $90,000 went to educating Paso Robles youth, and so nothing but good stuff.
And following up with that, you also donate to, in the tasting room sales, you donate to Must, correct? Yeah,
Must, a great local charity here. They work a lot with wineries in Paso, and we're one of many wineries, by the way. We're not unique in that regard. I think they raise, and I don't want to be wrong, but I think they raise millions of dollars a year just from working with wineries. And so we have a Petite Syrah, or 20 Petite Syrah, called Largesse, which is a French term for charity. And we donate some funds from every bottle we sell. The Must turns around and they find charities that meet certain criteria. You know, most of the money has to go to the end beneficiary, so as far as we know, last year the money we donated went to providing tutors for the children of single moms, which is makes sense given what our message with the winery and helping women. And if you think about it, if you're a single mom working all day and you come home, you've got to cook dinner, you've got to do all these things. Maybe your child is struggling in algebra or whatever. How do you get help? How do you find the time? So they send tutors to the house or to the school to help them through that. So we're very proud to work with Must. It's a great organization. I can't say enough about them. Wonderful people that work there, and we're happy to be a part of it.
So, as I said at the beginning, we are actually in downtown.
Yeah.
So, when you chose your tasting room, why did you choose downtown?
You know, it was part business decision, part personal decision. There's other great areas in Paso, like Tin City. If you haven't been there and you're watching this, go there. It's amazing. I love Tin City. Some great restaurants, great wine, just a lot of fun. Downtown Paso has a lot of history. My tasting room, like yours, is over 100 years old. The actual building itself, it's been tasting rooms, it's been a bar, it's been, I believe, a brothel at some point. It's just part of the rich history of Paso Robles. This is a 125-year-old town. The James Gang was here. We had the sulfur springs that people would come to all around the world for so-called healing principles. There's tunnels under Paso Robles that connect all the buildings back to the Prohibition era. And it's just got this, just rich with history. But on top of that, the present is so amazing. If I leave here during the day to go grab lunch, I'm just constantly saying hello to people. You know all the locals. You know every business owner. I grew up in LA. I yearned for that. I wanted that small town. You know everybody, and people are here to help you if you need help. There's a culture to downtown that makes you feel like you're in a different time, not just a different place. You feel like it's 75, 100 years ago, and I don't know. There's just something about it that it's almost, you can touch it. The feeling downtown. And there's no place I'd rather be. And if I wind up not in the wine business, or I wind up with doing tastings at a vineyard someplace, or doing something different, I'll be here all the time. I can't get enough of this place. Often, Callie and I will leave here and go right over to another tasting room and watch live music. I just love being here. I can't get enough of it. So to me, it was obvious.
And so if you had to explain downtown, this might be a tough question off the spur of the moment, but if you had to describe downtown in like 5 or less words to somebody who hasn't been here, what either describe it or what do they need to know?
I mean, first of all, I don't know the number of restaurants downtown that are all walking distance. I'm going to guess and say 30. You might have a different guess, but I would just guess there's 30 restaurants down here. Honestly, I could tell you every one of them is good or great. There are 31 last count tasting rooms downtown, and I don't care what kind of wine you like or what your sweet spot is, you will find multiple tasting rooms. And by and large, when you walk into that tasting room, you'll feel like a friend or a family member. I know it sounds corny, I know it seems unbelievable, but every single customer leaves here and says, I've been to 3 tasting rooms downtown today and I feel like I've made a bunch of friends. We are not that other wine tasting region in Paso Robles, I won't say the name of it, where you feel pretentious and you feel like you're being judged and you hope you're using the right fork and you hope your pinky's up and you're sipping right. People come in here, I had customers in here last week and they were barefooted.
All right.
They plop down. You come into tasting rooms in Paso, people have their dogs with them. We don't do the dog thing just because of the furniture and a couple of dog bite issues, but most tasting rooms in Paso, you can bring your dog, you can bring your kids, it's just very family oriented, and I see the same look in everybody's eyes when they come to Paso if they've never been here. They're honestly astonished, and they all look at the spouses look at each other and say, how can we live here? It's one of the few places I've been in my life where I came here on vacation. When I moved here, it never stopped feeling like vacation. I've been here 10 years. Paso Robles is a living, breathing vacation. It's just the nicest people on the planet. It's the Midwest mentality with the best food and best wine you can get. I don't know how else to say it.
That's awesome. That's a great way to say it. It's a great way. Well, I want to say thank you for doing this.
Thank you. I loved it.
But how can people find Crazy Woman if they're in Paso? You're on Pine Street.
1244 Pine Street, right next to the world famous 100-year-old Pine Street Saloon, right next to the world famous Racina Wines. You can obviously find us everywhere on social media. For those that still go to websites, which now somehow seems to be passe, but crazywomancellars.com. Our Instagram handle, I think, is at crazywomancellars.com. Kelly's going to yell at me if I'm wrong. Facebook, Crazy Woman Cellars. Call us, email us, text us, Instagram. We're there. Go check out our websites. Read the stories. Even if you don't want to come drink the wine, I swear to God, the stories, you'll read them and you'll think, how can this be that I haven't heard this before? How are these not movies? Come see us. We'd love to pour for you. I personally pour here. We're open 3 days a week. I pour Fridays and Saturdays. I know every customer. They know me. I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories. I feel it's a gift when people come in and they share their stories with me. Find us and come check it out.
And walk-ins?
Absolutely. Walk in. We'll always find a spot for you. Barring some kind of event where we're closed for a party or something, which is unusual. It's usually after hours. Otherwise, just walk in, bring your friends, let's sit down and drink some beer and wine and have some fun.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I loved it.
Hi.